Welcome to the Two Gurus Talk Compliance podcast with me, Kristy Grant-Hart. I'm here with the one and only Tom Fox. This week, we're covering whether OpenAI is becoming too big to fail, what CFOs who are embracing AI need to know about compliance, whether you should fire employees for political speech, and a Florida man calling 911 repeatedly because the clams in his takeout meal were too small. But first, Tom, how has your week been, and what is the most interesting development?
I do a daily news show, and we had two whoppers today. The first was CZ, the CEO and founder of Binance, was pardoned by President Trump. He of a $4 billion fine, just obviously a misunderstanding. But a little bit nearer and dearer to my heart was a huge gambling and betting scandal involving multiple NBA players and coaches, including a Hall of Famer, a head coach, and a finals MVP. And the repercussions of this, I think, I can't even begin to think how they're going to reverberate. And for the compliance professionals amongst us, there was even some lesson we're going to learn, I'm afraid, because one of the players was investigated by the NBA back in 23 for allegations of point shaving, i.e. a betting scandal.
Yep.
And he was cleared by the NBA.
Oh, boy.
If that was part of the indictment, and I haven't gotten the indictment to read about him, it really speaks to the need for hire professional investigative counsel. Don't do an in-house investigation. I can do an investigation. I've been a general counsel. I've been a CCO. But I'm not the best at investigating because I don't do it all the time. And a serious problem requires a serious response. But perhaps we'll save all that for a later day. But there are some real compliance issues in here, and it's a very dark day for the NBA.
Stay tuned to Two Gurus Talk Compliance as we find out more. All right, Tom, where do you want to start?
Let's start with an article from Payments. And I hope our listeners know I have a new podcast called AI in 5, where I look at 5 AI news stories, generally related to compliance, but sometimes just AI news. So I brought one of those stories over to talk this week because I thought it was really interesting. Anyway, payments.com had a story about CFOs embracing AI and what that means for compliance. And clearly the article was aimed at CFOs, but I thought it raised some really interesting compliance angles. And I think you did as well, because a couple of the CFOs interviewed for the article or interviewed before the article in a podcast or something like that talked about the inability to audit what the AI had done, opaqueness or lack of transparency. And that is a huge problem for CFOs because you've got things like Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX 404, SOX 301, and other things that require you to show your audit trail to show where your numbers came from. And of course, that's an outgrowth of the Enron scandal or in WorldCom scandals from the first part of this century. And so I thought that was really interesting. But the problem is the technology is outpacing the need or even requirement for auditing. So how do you kind of catch up in a way that will allow you to, particularly for regulated industries, but for literally any public company? So I thought it would raise some very interesting questions. I think we can get to the answer to that, not to throw a complete pitch at Diligent, but I know about some of the Diligent products
We got cool
that incorporate
stuff over here. Yeah.
You do, but it's not open AI, meaning put it out into the universe. You lose the privacy and protection of your data. It's a ringed fence tool that you put your information into, and then you get a response back. It's a lot easier to start auditing when you have something like that, or you create your own ring fence GPT or whatever you do. But I think we're going to answer that question, but I was just gratified it raised it in really such a, I don't want to say stark, but a direct way about the CFO requirements.
Tom, I really liked this article. I found it really thought-provoking. And one of the little points that it brought out that made my compliance hair spin around was talking about if agentic AI decides to change data flows and what happens if there's personal information or healthcare related information in the data flows it's looking at. So I hadn't really thought about AI deciding if there's a more efficient way to process data throughout the organization and makes decisions about how to do it quickly, but may not know about things like transfer impact assessments out of Europe into America, something like that, where how likely is it to have been trained on that? Most compliance officers don't know about those requirements. And are we going to let it do its own transfer impact assessment? Is that going to be good enough? I mean, when you look at the audit trail for how it made decisions, is it documented properly? I mean, there is a heck of a lot to think about here. So I thought this one was a good one. Thanks for bringing it up.
Oh, what about AWS?
All right. I just thought I would bring this one up because everyone was talking about it, certainly. The Amazon Web Services, or AWS, went out for about 2 hours recently. And I looked at this New York Times article, which is titled, "Amazon Outage Forces Hundreds of Websites Offline for Hours." Now, what kind of websites are we talking about? Some obscure ones like Hulu, Snapchat, Venmo, and the British government, it turns out. And although the websites were only down for a couple of hours, the New York Times was talking in its article about how it showed the fragility of global technology infrastructure. So some of the sites involved included McDonald's and the cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase. Now, there is no indication that the takedown was nefarious, so it appears it was an operational error coming out of a Virginia location. But beyond the basic annoyance people had with all their services down, there was a really sobering warning coming from this failure. For instance, the Times talked about communications in Ukraine going down, as did the Signal app, which is used for a lot of secure messaging. Now, critics, of course, are coming out saying that there's an over-reliance on a single set of the giant companies, right? AWS, Microsoft, Google. And the article ends by quoting German and EU activists calling for further regulation, requiring data and data services to be housed in local locations and jurisdictions. Germany does most of that anyway, rather than in America, where the whole thing could be taken down without any immediate recourse. So, Tom, I was in London last week. I was in Britain when this outage occurred.
Freudian slip.
Whoops. And I must say, I was taken rather aback by the fact the UK government's main websites are run on servers in the US. Like, what? But I also feel like, I mean, until there's an actual catastrophe, I don't think anyone's going to be rushing to stop or deviate from these big tech companies. And things like these kind of regulations are unlikely to come in. That's my crystal ball on this. What do you think, Tom? Is this canary in coal mine? Is this going to happen? Do we wait for catastrophe or nefarious action? Where are we here?
I have to say, Kristy, I'm a little more than a little disappointed because you didn't name the Compliance Podcast Network as one of those who's impacted by this.
It wasn't in the Times. Tom, I'm surprised it wasn't in the Times article. Sorry.
And we must speak to them. Yes, that's all the way down. It impacted down to little old me. But I live out in the country, so we lose internet from time to time. And what I learned was always have a few things that you can edit or work on that are not internet mandatory. I just moved over to some editing that I'd been putting off and did that. I also read the same series of articles that said it was not nefarious, but a technical glitch. And I just, because my internet goes out so often, it doesn't irritate me that much, but it's something that we have a backup plan. Even if I recognize with critical communication in Ukraine, you may have to do it in an old-fashioned way with a runner. But for people like us, if you lose internet for a few hours, well, just work on something else.
I don't know. I think we have compliance problems all over here, but let's see. Tom, you picked one that absolutely baffles me in your choice of it, but I am willing and ready to listen to the compliance angle on this. Go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
First of all, when this happened to you, were you at the Del Coronado?
No, but you're skipping ahead to my story. Go ahead. Tell me what the story is about that you want to pick.
This is my P.T. Barnum moment because there was an article, I think Sunday, but maybe Monday in the Wall Street Journal, that premium water at restaurants is a thing. And it's a real thing, and you're going to explain it may be the only thing sometimes. But yes, restaurants are selling premium water as a premium experience, and that it will enhance the quality of your meal and charging anywhere from $6 to $12, even $20 a bottle. And when I read that, I couldn't believe it. There really is a sucker born every minute. If you pay, now I'm willing to pay for a San Pellegrino, that's my choice. Or if I want a flavored water, a lime Perrier, that's my choice. And sometimes I like a fizzy water, for those who know what that means. But that's a choice I make, and it's not foisted upon me by a restaurant saying, oh, we only do this. I just couldn't believe this. Having said all of that, many years ago, in a town I lived in, there was one restaurant that one of their key selling points was premium salt. They had 6 different types of salt, and they would go an entire presentation. They had sea salt, they had land salt, they had country salt, and they actually would explain what each salt did. But it was free because it was salt. And so if you've got a different tasting water that you want me to taste, I'll taste it if it's free. I'm not paying $6 a bottle. But I know, I didn't realize you had personal experience with this.
Okay, so we have no compliance angle. We have Tom's outrage, which I'm enjoying. The article basically talked about water menus, right? Like a wine list, it's a water list. And how, in Los Angeles, of course, is the epicenter for this, because of course it is. I have no shame about that. That's okay. When I read this article, actually what bothered me, Tom, was not that they had these lists, because at every one of the one they suggested, they still had tap water. But I went to this restaurant on Coronado Island in San Diego in June, and they had signs up on the menu, we will not serve tap water. If you want water, you must buy our Italian water because it's an Italian restaurant and it will ruin the food if we have tap water with it. So I got very peeved, almost left, but then we stayed. It was pretty good. Would I go back? I'm annoyed. Maybe not. Not sure. All right, getting back to the compliance part of our compliance podcast. We're going to go to Matt Kelly's article in Radical Compliance, and it is titled, An Intriguing Whistleblower Award Case. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this one, Tom. So what is this case about? Why is it intriguing? Matt raises the question of whether the way the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, is it disincentivizing internal whistleblowers in the way it compensates them and calculates that. So the case at issue is one of a whistleblower who was paid just over $3 million for the tip sent to the SEC. Right? But so based on Matt's calculations, which are relatively public, the full penalty paid was between 11 and 33 million. So the whistleblower complained that he wasn't paid enough because he had blown the whistle internally first, which most whistleblowers do. The company took his report seriously, and they paid recompense to some victims. And then the company self-reported the issue, which means it got credit for it, right? The whistleblower argued that the monetary sanction should have included the reimbursement to the victims, right? And he said, if I called the SEC first without blowing the whistle internally, I would have made more cash. The reimbursement should have been part of this penalty. The SEC told him exactly where to go with his argument, and they cited a long-standing whistleblower payment rule that only compensation should be made to whistleblowers for penalties, percentage of penalties, and not reimbursements. Matt Kelly's argument is that the SEC is likely disincentivizing whistleblowers by taking this stance. So after all, whistleblowers need to have the penalty as big as possible to get their biggest reward. And if that's the case, then we should be shifting how we are doing this. Tom, I understand the SEC's calculations here. I doubt many whistleblowers are looking deeply into SEC calculating rules to determine whether to report internally or externally first. What do you think? Does Matt have a point? Is this an issue? Where do you come out on this?
So I think this is part of a very grand scheme by the SEC, this administration's SEC, to eviscerate the whistleblower program. They have made it clear they're not accepting cases during the lockdown. They've made it even more difficult to report a case in. They're paying out less and less. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if the second 2 years of this Trump term, we see very little whistleblower awards. The SEC is clearly beholden to the corporate interest in this. And I just see this as a part of a very big program to do away as much as they can with this law.
Do you think that the calculation piece of it is disincentivizing, or do you think that it paying penalties is penalties, reimbursement isn't penalties, and therefore it's separate? From a whistleblower perspective or from the SEC's rationale, do you think that it's actually disincentivizing, or do you think it doesn't matter?
I think it's disincentivizing the plaintiff's bar.
Okay.
And the problem there is not that you and I would advocate anything to incentivize the plaintiff's bar because they're already incentivized.
Yeah.
But they are the true experts in whistleblower claims, and they know how to file it. They know how to give the SEC what they want. And if we start losing top whistleblower plaintiffs, we'll have less high quality whistleblowing reports to the SEC. But I think that's all a part of what the SEC is trying to do, is just eviscerate this program.
All right. Let's talk about some pretty big, crazy things like too big to fail. Tell me about OpenAI. This is a really interesting one you picked too. I like this one.
Yeah, Sam Altman has been literally on a worldwide tour securing funding from competitors, from customers, from investors at scales that are just literally, as you said, beyond comprehension. Now, you're probably going to say, Tom, Elon Musk wants $1 trillion pay package, so what's $100 billion between friends? And you might be right. But 3 or 4 things went through my head, one of which is this. These are all interlocking circular deals where OpenAI is either getting some chips and they're giving some credits, or maybe they're paying some money and maybe they're doing a rev share, but maybe it's a credit because nothing has ever happened. But it's these huge circular deals. The first thing I thought of is near the end of Bernie Madoff's reign, he had moved from the U.S. to Europe to Asia to fund his Ponzi scheme. So he was kind of riding that circuit across as he tapped out in each of those geographic areas. And that was one thought I had about Sam Altman, because he did this literally on a round the world gig. He tapped out Europe, he tapped out the Saudis, he tapped out the UAE, then he moved to the Far East and tapped out Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So he's gotten a lot of money. That's sort of an Enron-ish scare for me, coming from Houston at that time frame. But this one, too big to fail, this one really intrigued me because it's essentially AIG. And I can't remember if you'd ever had to deal with AIG back in the law firm days. They were the prime backup insurer for literally, if not the United States, the world. And they had to be propped up during the financial crisis of 2008, as distasteful as that may have been. If they had gone down, it would have been complete chaos in the markets. And Altman may have positioned OpenAI in that same way with this interlocking set, because if he goes down, the rest of these companies might go down, and that could trigger a worldwide, if not depression, certainly an economic downturn. Maybe he's just crazy like a fox.
I mean, okay. So yes, I think there's there's a bit of an and what are we supposed to do about it? But I do think that there is a lot of potential for problems here. The article that you chose, which was called How Sam Altman Tied Tech's Biggest Players to OpenAI, there was links to some of the questions about whether or not this is a bubble, right? And when you actually get into the details, it's pretty astonishing. One of the quotes from that said that today's numbers are far larger than the dot-com bubble, employing a massive shift in the economy would need to make these investments worthwhile. Bain and Company estimated that the wave of AI infrastructure spending would require $2 trillion in annual AI revenue by 2030, which, let's remember, is not far away, which they said by comparison is more than the combined 2024 revenue of Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, and NVIDIA. Whoa. And more than 5 times the size of the entire global software subscription market everywhere. And lastly, an MIT report found that 95% of organizations surveyed are getting no return on their AI product investments, despite everyone going absolutely nuts about it. We shall see. We shall see. We will keep covering for sure.
There you go.
Look, we all love AI, right? I mean, pets.com went out of fashion or went under, and it was the example of the .com bust, and now everyone uses Chewy, right? We get all our dog food delivered to our door, and pets.com was the same thing. It just took 20 years to actually make it work. So I think when I look at it, I'm thinking it's a lot more that model, but yikes, these deals are woohoo. Okay. All right, let's get back into the direct world from Corporate Compliance Insights. And this is a really interesting sort of Q&A that was published there. And the title of it is, Yes, You Can Fire an Employee for a Problematic Post, but Should You? So the question was posed to one of CCI's advice columnists, and the question asker basically said, hey, we've got this problematic post. Everyone thinks we should fire the employee. I'm not sure what we should do and how fast. Basically, the employee had put up an inflammatory post on social media. It went viral. The board and management was under huge pressure to do something fast. And the question is interesting because it involves the intersection of imperfect humans, political polarization, free speech, private lives, interests of the company. And the advice columnist suggested acting slowly and performing a proper investigation, which is basically the opposite of what usually happens, even if that feels uncomfortable and can make other employees mad, feeling like nothing is happening. So there's a danger there, in my opinion. She also asked the company to examine its values and determine whether the speech is out of line with them, but also how consistently those values are considered or enforced. And lastly, the columnist advised readers to remember that in the past, companies could get ahead of these scandals and make PR plans. But as we covered last time on Two Gurus, the bots take over, fan the flames, and PR can't even get ahead of it because it's already gone. So, Tom, my sister, Kelly, she's a partner at a very large law firm, and she handles these cases all the time. So I will hear about one of the companies she's representing will have an employee with an incendiary post. The post goes viral. Other employees see it, have furious reactions. Person gets fired, then they sue for firing, which can be tricky. Tom, looking at this, where's the line between poor judgment, hate speech, disagreeable or ugly opinions, and when should a company act?
I think you have to have some clear red lines. If it's somebody's espousing Nazi rhetoric, says kill the Jews, or burns crosses, or anything along those lines, I think you have to immediately terminate. This approach, I will say, I was once upon a time a labor lawyer or an employment lawyer, so I appreciated a much more measured approach. And I think unless it's one of those clear picture of a dead body saying, isn't this great? You have to take some time to do an investigation. Did they really do it? And now you have to ask the questions, is this you?
Right.
As we learned.
Or deep fake or the wrong name or, oh my God, right?
Or the wrong name. Do you suspend the employee? Do you suspend them with pay? What do you do there? What do you do with a team member who works with someone whose political opinion is so antithetical to yours, you feel like you can't work with them? I mean, I'm sure you've lost friends too from the first Trump administration to this one, and I've lost some very close friends, but I just don't care to be around them now. But in the workplace, sometimes you can't avoid that. Remember, compliance is the holder of the flame for institutional justice and institutional fairness. Justice means there's a process. Fairness means the process applies to everyone. So if you do something, have a process, have that process transparent, follow that process, and then treat everybody the same, whether they're in the boardroom or the shop floor. I'm a big believer in due process, emphasis on process. So if you engage in a due process and you find termination is appropriate, while I might find that distasteful, to deliver the ultimate sanction in the employment setting, if there's process and that process has come to that conclusion, I fully support that process.
Righty, very good. Okay, Tom, what is the future of securities litigation defense?
So this comes to us from the D&O Diary, and if you don't subscribe to this, you really should. It's a great blog post. It's a one of a kind. It's a fellow U of M law grad, so we have to shout out Go Blue to Kevin LaCroix. But he writes on D&O, and I would say about a third.
D&O, explain.
Directors and Officers Liability Insurance.
Thank you.
And I would say about a third of his posts, either directly or very indirectly, talk to compliance issues. This one does not. But it intrigued me because it was the best history of securities litigation that I had ever seen. And he talked about how securities litigation developed in the 60s and came of age really in the 70s with Melvin Weiss and Bill Lurch, who were the leaders in this. They ran afoul of legal issues, and they were both criminally convicted for pulling some scams in that field. And then as it looked like the plaintiff's bar might go down a little bit in quality, we had several accounting scandals. And so a new generation of plaintiff's bar arose, and it brought the issues forward. And the compliance angle, at least, was you need to have a process in place to prevent securities violations in your company. And that may be in the general counsel's office, but it might be your conflict of interest policy, or it might be shadow trading, which means if you're in the energy industry and you know something your company knows, and you opine that another company may be in the same imbroglio and you bet on that other company, that's a securities violation, which seems to me insane, but we have people convicted for that. It can be very tricky in a wide variety of ways, but I really love the history of the securities bar, plaintiff and defense, and what's important now and how compliance can tie in to help your general counsel, or if you're a large enough company to have a kind of a securities head within your legal department to work with that lawyer to make sure you have compliance processes and policies and procedures that are clearly set out and that the employees are routinely reminded of those. Insider trading being the most notable.
All right. Yes, it was a long history. I found myself going, how long is this article? Because securities litigation isn't the forefront of my thought process. But he did do a very good job of explaining how broken the U.S. civil system is and how expensive and nonsensical it is. I agree with him on all of that. Okay, we don't cover a huge amount of antitrust or intellectual property infringement over here, Tom, but today is a good day to do, I think. My next article comes from the Wall Street Journal. I love this one. It's titled Smucker versus Trader Joe's, Lululemon versus Costco, Fight Over Brands Goes to Court. The article details the fierce battles that corporations like Smucker, Mondelez, and Lululemon are fighting right now against makers of generic or store-branded products that those companies find suspiciously and allegedly illegally similar to their own. Podcast listeners, there is a link to this article. Please go to it so you can see the photos comparing the products and their packaging to the alleged infringers. I think you'll find that some of them, maybe not all, have really good reason to be peeved. So as food prices continue to rise, consumers frequently are choosing lower priced store brand or generic versions of their favorites. And the developers of the originals aren't happy about it. So the article details the multi-decade, who knew, fight Smucker has waged against companies using the look and feel of its Uncrustables peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to create confusion in the marketplace such that the average consumer would confuse the Smucker version with the cheaper imitators. Likewise, Mondelez's Oreo cookies have been in a big old fight with Aldi's version of the sandwich cookies, and Lululemon has accused Costco of copying its jacket design. So there's a big difference in law between being inspired by best-selling products and ripping them off. That, of course, is in the eyes of the judge, jury, and litigators. So I thought this one was interesting, Tom, because in times of economic challenges and continued inflation, this seems like it'll be a bigger and bigger problem. And frankly, compliance officers may have a role in saying, wait, hold on here. Do we have any kind of either antitrust or infringement concerns? What do you think they can do to manage this kind of risk?
So in Houston, there was a golf course company called Tour 18 that put together a golf course of the top 18 golf holes in America. Oh. And it would surprise no one that one of them was par 3 at Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
Which looks out over the Pacific. It is just an absolutely gorgeous golf hole. It's very challenging, and it's breathtaking with its beauty of the hole. And as you look out over the Pacific, and it's obviously a very great course to play. So one of the holes on Tour 18 was the 17th, par 3. Pebble Beach sued Tour 18, saying you have stolen our trademark par 3, number 17, and they won, which I thought was unbelievable, but it shows you the power of exactly what you've described. And for the compliance professional, I think what it needs, first of all, the general counsel needs to come see the CCO rather, and say, what do we do here? What you do is you put policies and procedures in place, and you have a review. You have the eyes of Dr. T.J. Mecklenburg gazing down upon you as you drive into New York City on the Long Island Parkway. Have a process where there's a review of the process. And unfortunately, litigation has become not just time honored, but a business strategy now. And you're probably going to have to face that. And the laws, I think, are very powerful. And the examples you've given us may look a whole lot alike.
Did you open it? Did you see some of them? It's really,
oh, yeah.
It'll be interesting.
In another lawsuit in Texas, we have a convenience store on interstates called Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
And their
beloved.
mascot is
Beloved.
a beaver.
Yes.
Somebody opened one with an alligator, and Buc-ee successfully sued, saying, oh, no, an animal is close enough to us. So it is a very tricky field. Ooh. And you really need expert help.
That's because everyone loves Buc-ee so much. I'm convinced of that. All right. What's happening with AI chatbots in India?
So this is just as karmic as my water article was. This is karmic in the other direction, that chatbots are replacing Indian call centers. And I just couldn't resist this, because I think everyone has experienced a call center person has a very difficult time understanding you and a very difficult time explaining to you what you need to do. And occasionally you get a very good one, but sometimes you don't. And so having AI chatbot replacing people who worked in call centers in India for U.S. companies, I just thought was karmic. Now, the question I have, though, is the same question you and I have discussed around AI. What if your call center is your entry-level position into a tech job? What if because you work at, you name the company, call center, you have to learn the technical specs so you can walk someone like me through an issue or a problem. And from there, you get enough experience, and you can go into development, you can go into marketing, whatever it may be, but it really is an entry-level position. We talked about, how are you going to train an associate? The old-fashioned way was you gave them an impossible assignment, you sent them in the library and said, figure it out, and come back and you can ask me any question, but not really. And then they would get together with more senior associates and get answers and then write it up and figure it out. At least that was my experience. And that is gone with OpenAI or ChatGPT or you name the tool. And what happens to those companies that are using these call centers as feeders in for higher level tech jobs? Once again, as with the debate we had over lawyers or discussion we had, I don't pretend to know the answer, but I just know there's going to be the need for some type of training to bring those people up to a level that they can really take the next step.
All right. So I looked at this really differently. So this article came from Reuters, and it's called Meet the AI Chatbots Replacing India's Call Center Workers. And actually, listening to you talk about your take on it, Tom, I'm actually, from a compliance perspective, more concerned about the fact we've covered a couple of different articles where courts have said, whatever your bot said, you are responsible for it. So we saw ones where I think it was in Canada, somebody relied on the fact that the bot told them that they had 4 weeks vacation when they actually only had 2, and they got fired. And the court said, no, if the chatbot says 4, it's 4. So you're dealing with a lot of trust in these AI chatbots that they're going to do a fantastic job. They have human-like voices apparently. And the fact of the matter is, it also says in that article that 78% of people would prefer to talk with a human rather than an AI bot. Put me in that number. So I don't know. Again, this is one of those, are we sure we're ready for this? I am not convinced, having looked at all the AI I've looked at this point. We'll see. All righty, Tom. Shall we take this home with our trip to Florida?
Can't wait, Kristy. What do you got for us?
All right.
What does Florida Man have?
Florida Man. This time, our Florida man is a real pearl. His name is Nelson Augusto. He thought the size of the clams in his takeout order were so minuscule that it rose to a shell-shocking emergency. Mr. Augusto ordered from Krabby's Seafood Shack, and boy, did it live up to the name. When the food arrived, our Florida man was horrified to discover the clams that were, in his words, extremely so small. The man was steamed and called the restaurant to complain. They sent a replacement, but he was not appeased. So he did what any good Florida man would do and called 911 to report his clam calamity. The dispatcher did not take the bait. They told him to call the non-emergency number instead. But when that didn't work, Mr. Augusto doubled down and called 911, repeatedly declaring an emergency over his shrimp-sized clams. He demanded officers respond to his seafood situation, and officers did go. They went to his house and netted a misdemeanor charge of misusing 911. So, Tom, the moral of the story is, if you clam up before the cops arrive, you might avoid getting netted for something truly shellfish.
I think I may have a second career for you as a writer of dad jokes.
I'm not going to lie. Occasionally, ChatGPT helps me with these ridiculous puns, which I very much appreciate. See, that is the proper use of AI, Florida man puns. Thank you for joining us on Two Gurus Talk Compliance. Until next time, I'm Kristy Grant-Hart.
And I'm Tom Fox.